This video is going to go over regenerating Unreal Engine project files, the how and the why. Let's start with the how first and get to the why later on. First off, delete all non-essential folders for an Unreal Engine project, especially ones that are not tracked in version control. These are ones that are generated and specific to each computer, so we want to make them and generate them on each computer. Those are going to be the solution file if you're working in a C++ project, the saved folder, the intermediate folder, the binaries, and the .vs folder. If you don't see the .vs folder in Windows Explorer, click on View and show File Name by Extension, or File Name Extensions, and Hidden Objects. For a builds folder, that's going to just be a folder where you package your projects to. You don't have to delete this one if you don't want to. If you want to keep your builds for later on for testing purposes, go ahead. They are not going to be touched in this. That's a folder you made, not one that Unreal made. So we hit delete on these, and all we have left are the main essential ones. Config, content, if you have plugins, leave them there, source, and the project name .u project file. First step, we're going to right click and generate Visual Studio project files. Let's right click on the .u project file and click generate Visual Studio project files. This will bring up a pop-up, generating project files, and this will actually create the Visual Studio solution file, the saved folder, the intermediate folder, and the .vs folder. This is all of the source code that you, any developers, or just Unreal in general, needs to function. Next up, you're going to click on the .u project file, double click on that, and it's going to have a pop-up. This project is missing modules, they're built in a different engine version. This is okay, this is exactly what you should see. If you are not using the Fmod plugin, you won't see these, you will only see your project name. Would you like to rebuild them now? Yes, I would. It'll bring up another pop-up. This one will take a little bit longer, but after that, your project should appear and you should be good to go. So after this is done, if you see a pop-up that says something along the lines of Unreal could not build the project files, try rebuilding manually from the source, this means that there's an error in one of your C++ files. If you're a programmer, open up Visual Studio, open up the solution file, hit Control-Shift-B to build the project manually, and look for errors in the output window. If you're not a programmer, please notify the programmers on your team and they'll take it from there. Now that we've gone over the how, let's go over the why. The first reason for why you do this is for getting changes to any editor or project settings files. When someone on your team edits, say, like the input action mappings or access mappings for how your player actually controls the character or the world around it, those files are going to be changed on their local computer in two locations. One, we're going to change the default, in this case, input.ini file, and we're also going to change the normal input.ini file. That is the file that Unreal reads. The default input.ini file is the file that Unreal uses to generate its local input.ini file. Those are a lot of names. Let's take a look where they live, and that should shine some light on why they're important. First off, we'll look for the default file. That lives in config. Notice that config is one of the folders we did not delete, and it is a folder that's tracked by version control. We see in here default input.ini. This is one that every developer who has access to the repo and the project will have. Then let's look at saved config Windows, and we see a normal input.ini file here. This is what Unreal actually reads when you see the editor settings inputs and the input action and access mappings. So this was generated when we generated the Visual Studio files and then rebuilt the project. So Unreal now has the new version of those generated from the default versions in the config folder. The next reason is because there was a change in C++ source code files, or scripts were written, and your developers or programmers may have referenced them somewhere in the project file via like a blueprint function or somewhere else. If that is the case, and say that a developer wrote a function in C++ that's used in a blueprint script somewhere in the game, if you don't regenerate the project files, Unreal is not going to know where the code is referenced or where that source code is from. It's going to have the reference to it in the blueprint file and say the function was called, like, I don't know, print string 15 times. But it's going to see print string 15 times, but it's not going to know where that code came from. It's not going to know what the function's purpose is, what its guts are, how to execute it. It's just going to say, I don't know what this is. It's going to crash. It's actually not going to let you even open up the project because it would just crash immediately. In that case, we have to force Unreal to look for the source code and to link and reference it. That's why we regenerate the Visual Studio project files, because even though it would see the script in the solution file if you just opened it up, Unreal itself does not know it's there. So we regenerate the solution file and the Visual Studio Code project files, and Unreal is forced to acknowledge the fact that that script now exists. I'm going to put it in the solution, I'm going to reference it in my engine code, and everything's going to be good. And at that point, you should be able to open up your project and continue working and developing. So that should honestly cover almost all situations for regenerating project files. If you have any questions, go ahead and talk to your team leads or tech leads or programmers, developers, what have you on your team, and they'll be able to help out more. In the meantime, have a good one.